In the 1950s, J.L. Austin, no relation to Jane as far as I know, published a book entitled How to Do Things with Words, which sounds like the sort of thing that you might give to a toddler who was just learning how to speak and how to read. In fact, it was more or less quite the opposite. He was a philosopher of language, and this was a fairly hefty tome on the nature of language and words. Unfortunately, Austin is now predominantly remembered for a rather amusing gaffe that took place when he was lecturing over in the United States. He was lecturing at Columbia University. It was attended by an American philosopher, Sidney Morgenbesser, and Austin made the claim that although a double negative in English has a positive meaning, there's no case in which a double positive implies a negative, to which Morgenbesser shouted from the auditorium, "Yeah, right." Unfortunately, that rather overshadows a more important thing that Austin did, which was to give us the idea of speech-act theory. And I'll tell you what that is with a few examples. A lot of the way that we use language is sharing information. In fact, that seems the most obvious way that we use all of our language. So I might say, for example, this lectern is wooden. By saying that, I'm attempting to impart to you some piece of knowledge that I have, which admittedly you probably have as well with your better view of it from that side. But nevertheless, what I'm doing is giving some of the information and knowledge that I have out to you. But there's another kind of speaking as well. For example, I might say, Sandy, bring me a service sheet. And unlike passing information, what happens there is that I'm attempting some action to take place in the real world because of the words that I've spoken. Now you can see that Sandy hasn't brought me a sheet, and you might think, well, exactly, those words don't really imply or require that action actually does take place, and they don't. But dependent on the context, you can be fairly certain of it. Had I not told you what I was about to do, was I not in this situation, but nevertheless standing up here in front with your attention on me in the position of power, asking a fairly reasonable request, can I have a service sheet, then Sandy probably would have brought one up to me, especially considering had she just ignored it, that would have been within our society and culture perceived as being rude, or if she just said, no, get one yourself, it would have been a little embarrassing or unbecoming at least. But there's a more clear and obvious example. I have the privilege every now and then of saying the following words. In the presence of God and before this congregation, Charlie and Edward have given their consent, made their marriage vows to each other. They've declared their marriage by the joining of hands and by the giving and receiving of rings. I therefore proclaim that they are husband and wife. Now, unlike the previous example, nothing gets brought from one place to another. There's no kind of physical change, but clearly the nature of reality has changed. They weren't married, and now they are. We know what that means, and we can identify that as being different, the one from the other. And it's worth noting here that none of the legal stuff has taken place. There's been no writing down any documents. All that bit that we end up doing afterwards, that's just a record of what's already taken place. They've given their consent, they've made their marriage vows, and then the priest has spoken the words, I therefore proclaim that they are husband and wife, and they really are. Our words have power to change and to create our reality. This is what James is getting at when he talks about how powerful the tongue is. So also the tongue, he says, is a small member, yet it boasts of great exploits. Unless we forget how important words are to our faith, we worship the God whom we also call the Word, the Logos, as John says at the beginning of his Gospel. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. The same God who at the creation speaks into the void "Let there be light," and there was light. The idea that Austin so wonderfully brought us is that words change and create our reality. And so when Jesus addresses his disciples and says, "But who do you say that I am?" and Peter answers him, "You are the Messiah," Peter is changing his own reality. You could think of that statement, "You are the Messiah," as a bit like our first statement. This pulpit is wooden, just a kind of statement of fact, a piece of information to be passed. But if it were, then it would be an awfully good guess by Peter. Jesus hasn't done very much typically Messiah-ish up to this point. This statement by Peter is much more. It's a confession, a proclamation. He's had this little itch in his mind that just maybe this chap who's been going around and healing and teaching, just maybe he's the Messiah spoken of long ago. But here it suddenly becomes real for him. This thought that had just inhabited his private mind now becomes a public declaration. And it changes his reality because, as the prophet Joel states, and as the New Testament writers repeat, everyone who calls upon the name of the Lord shall be saved. It's a mark of his salvation. The way we use words makes a difference. It changes and creates our reality. I'll give you one more rather flippant example. A couple of weeks ago, Helen and I were over in Prague. We arrived on the Sunday and we were leaving on the following Saturday. And one of the things we wanted to do when we were there was go out to this 5-floor club. It's the largest club in Europe. The problem was that kind of Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, not great days to go out clubbing, as I'm sure you're all well aware. Friday night, a much better night. Our flight was about 10 o'clock on Saturday morning. So we knew that if we went out on Friday, we'd have to be in breakfast by 6:30, leaving the hotel at 7 in order to catch our flight. But we did it anyway. We arrived back at the hotel about 4 o'clock on Saturday morning. We set the alarm for an hour later, woke up very groggily and packed our bags and shuffled our way downstairs to reception and into breakfast. And I was just preparing to slice open my fried egg and bacon, feeling very snoozy, and I heard this voice. "Good morning! Hi, my name's Tom. What's your name?" And the guy goes, "Hello, sir. I'm Michael. Welcome to the hotel." "Oh, it's great. We just arrived this morning. So good to see you. Can we get a coffee?" They're American, if you haven't worked out by now. And Michael says, yes, sir, it's a buffet, please help yourself. "Oh, great, Michael, this is my wife, Jennifer. Have you met Jennifer? This is Michael. He does the breakfast." And I'm thinking, oh, this poor chap's probably been up from 4 o'clock this morning, wiping the tables and preparing, and this is the last thing he wants, and it's certainly the last thing that I want. "So the coffee's over here, Michael." Yes, sir, the coffee." "Oh, great. Do you have some butter?" Yes, sir, the butter." So I think maybe this will be the end of it. But no, then his mates, Mike and Margaret, they arrive next, and on it goes. "Have you tried the croissants? Oh, they're wonderful." And I'm thinking, oh, please, shh. The words they were using were creating their reality, and it certainly wasn't the reality that I wanted that morning. All that resulted in was me being a little bit grumpy, but our words can have much more serious consequences than that. The words that we use create our reality, and you will have seen and heard some of these words used recently. The swarm on our streets. Halt the asylum tide now. They are a plague. We should use gunboats. They're like cockroaches. We should release the hounds. Our words create our realities, and every time we hear and we see those words and we don't challenge them, we allow our realities to be impinged upon a little bit more and a little bit more. And I've heard Christians who proclaim Jesus Christ as Lord, the same Jesus who was himself a refugee, I have heard them say, we're too full, they should go somewhere else, they're not welcome here. With the tongue, we bless the Lord and Father, and with it, we curse those who are made in the likeness of God. From the same mouth come blessing and cursing. My brothers and sisters, this ought not to be so. I'll leave you with one more story. Yesterday I was at a march with tens of thousands of people in central London in support of the asylum seekers, refugees and economic migrants. And there was another refugee there with whom you might be familiar who caught my eye. He's called Paddington Bear. Paddington Bear came from Peru. He was orphaned in an earthquake which destroyed his habitat, and he went to live with Aunt Lucy for a little while, but when she could no longer take care of him because she went into a retirement home for old bears, Paddington stowed away aboard a boat bound for England. That might be a familiar story at the moment. And why did Paddington choose England as his destination? Because Aunt Lucy had told him this before he left. She said, long ago, people in England sent their children by train with labels around their necks so they could be taken care of by complete strangers in the countryside where it was safe. They will not have forgotten how to treat strangers. I am not willing to believe that we have forgotten how to treat strangers. Amen.